Hello and welcome back. We're continuing with our video lesson on 1.6 Kingdom Plantae, and in this video we're going to look at our very first Group Bryophytes. Okay, as you can see here, you have a general idea of what bryophytes look like. They are these things, these nice wet, moist green things, and we're going to look at them in more detail. The learning objectives for this video is that I hope by the end of this lesson, you will be able to describe the unique characteristics of group bryophytes, state the classification of bryophytes into 3 phyla, and last but not least, state the terrestrial adaptations for bryophytes. And if you're ready, let's get started. First things first, these are all bryophytes. We usually look at bryophytes and divide them into 3 common phyla. Again, if you look at other books, sometimes they have more than 3, but in your syllabus, we're only going to focus on these 3. So if you think that bryophytes are like lumut ataupun mosses, then you're pretty much correct because that is the main phylum that we usually associate with bryophytes. Okay, so that is phylum Bryophyta, commonly referred to as moss. And it is represented here by this species called Polytrichum species. So inilah contoh yang kami paling suka lah kalau cakap pasal phylum Bryophyta. The second phylum that we look at in this group is phylum Hepatophyta. So this is also called liverworts, hepato meaning liver, and then it is always represented by this species called Marchantia species. The third phylum is phylum Entocerophyta. Entocerophyta meaning hornworts. Okay, sebab dia nampak macam tanduk. And it's usually represented by this species called Entoceros species. Now let's have a look at the unique characteristics in bryophytes. First things first, you may have noticed that their habitats are usually moist and shady places. Okay, so that is the very first unique characteristic. They usually only live in moist and shady places. And they are homosporous. That means all these plants will only produce one type of spore. Rather than male and female, it's kind of both in the same. Dominant generation of bryophytes is its gametophyte. So as I've said in the previous video, some plants have a dominant gametophyte generation and some plants have a dominant sporophyte generation. In this group, all bryophytes will have dominant generation gametophyte. So that means its gametophyte will be large in size and lives longer. Whereas the sporophytes are smaller in size, they are short-lived, and they will depend on the gametophytes for nutrients and water. So the gametophytes are able to carry out photosynthesis, but the sporophytes maybe not. Okay, so if we're taking the example of Polytrichum species, okay, so this is from phylum Bryophyta. This part down here that is greenish is showing the gametophyte generation. This part up here that looks a little bit like flower, nampak macam bunga tapi dia bukan bunga. Okay, bahagian yang kuning-oranye itu adalah dia punya sporophyte generation. So, kalau kita tengok dia punya gametophyte generation yang purple itu akan lebih besar, hidup lebih lama, dapat buat fotosintesis. Yang kuning itu, which is the sporophyte generation, it lives only for a short while and then it depends on the purple part. All right, so moving on. Another unique characteristic of bryophytes is that they are non-vascular plants. So they don't have any of the xylem and phloem for transport and support. And they have no true roots, no true stems, no true leaves. So if we're looking at this diagram down here of Polytrichum once again, these look like leaves, but they are not called leaves because they don't have xylem and phloem. These look like stem, but they're not called stem because they don't have xylem and phloem. And they don't have real roots. What looks like roots is actually just called rhizoids. Okay, dia dipanggil sebagai rhizoid saja. Some of the bryophytes may have specialized conducting tissues to transport water and organic compounds. So walaupun dia tidak xylem dengan phloem yang benar, dia mungkin ada beberapa tisu yang khas untuk memindah atau memunggahkan air dan juga products of photosynthesis. The cell walls lack lignin. So all of these cells in bryophytes are not as tough as the cells that are in angiosperm. So dia bukan macam kayu balak punya sel. Okay? Kayu balak punya sel banyak lignin. Ini tiada lignin. Jadi dia lembut-lembut. And the gametophytes consist of only one or a few cells thick. Dia sangat nipis, beberapa sel ataupun kadang-kadang satu sel saja tebal dia. So all the cells are placed close to water and dissolved minerals, and this will provide large surface area to increase absorption of water and minerals. Biasanya bryophytes dia akan tinggal di tempat yang basah, lembab untuk sebab ini. Okay, they are in the moist and wet places, so they are close to water, so they can absorb water easily and absorb the dissolved minerals in water easily. Most bryophytes will grow close to the ground and they are supported by their rhizoids. The rhizoids' purpose is to anchor the bryophytes to the soil supaya dia tidak terhanyut atau terlari lah. Itu untuk lekatkan dia kepada tanah sahaja. This part is called the rhizoid, in case it wasn't clear enough. And this is also part of the reason why bryophytes are also short. Okay, they don't have vessels, they don't have xylem and also phloem. They don't have lignin to support them to grow taller, and they need to be close to water to absorb minerals. So that's why all of them are usually very small and very short. Okay, moving on with another unique characteristics of bryophytes is that they need a watery medium for both asexual and sexual reproduction. Let's have a look. In asexual reproduction, the dispersal of gemmy from gemma cup will need watery medium or raindrops, such as in Marchantia species. So let's have a look at this example. This is an example of a gemma cup in Marchantia species. So dalam tu adalah baby Marchantia. What is going to happen is that it looks like this. Okay, dari tepi dia nampak macam ni. Dia macam satu cawan yang mengandungi dia punya anak-anak. Dan bila hujan, when it rains and the raindrops fall into the gemma cup, it's going to disperse the gemmy. Dia macam melimpah keluar. Bila air itu mengalir keluar, dia akan hanyutkan gemmy itu sekaligus. Okay, so it's going to take that gemmy and go to a new place. And when it reaches a new place, the gemmy can grow into new organisms, grow into new individual plants. All right, and that is the example of asexual reproduction. For the example of sexual reproduction, this one, it needs water because bryophytes produce biflagellated sperm cells. So the sperm of bryophytes can swim. They need the watery medium to swim to the archegonia, which is the female part of the bryophytes. Okay, so yeah, this is an example of bryophytes. This is Marchantia species. You can see here, this is the rhizoids. Ini yang sudah diterbalikkan, Marchantia yang sudah diterbalikkan. Dari sebelah bawah kita boleh nampak dia punya rhizoids. Nampak macam akar tapi bukan akar. Dan sebelah kanan ini adalah diagram untuk Polytrichum species. Okay, for this one, this is what Polytrichum species looks like in nature. That is the sporophyte generation. Down here is the gametophyte generation. Very easy to identify. Here we also look at the anatomy a little bit. So kamu boleh cuba ingatlah kalau kamu mampu. Yang di atas ni dipanggil capsule. Ini tangkai dia dipanggil seta. Di bahagian di mana sporophyte bergantung kepada gametophyte dipanggil sebagai kaki dia, which is foot. And down here it's just called gametophyte. Okay, so this is phylum Bryophyta Polytrichum species. Now we look at the next phylum's example, which is Marchantia species. So Marchantia species, you can see this one. It has a part that will produce male gamete and then a part that will produce female gametes. So the part that produces male gametes is the antheridia. It looks like this. This is the part that will produce the female gametes called the archegonia. So kalau ada sperm itu adalah daripada antheridia. Bila ada air, dia akan berenang kepada archegonia pada individu Marchantia lain. Okay, so this is diagram of what the Archegonia and Enteridium looks like. And this is a picture of what the Marcantia plant looks like. And you can see very clearly it has several gemma cups for its asexual reproduction. So nampaklah niya ada banyak gemma cup. Bila hujan nanti, semua isi-isi dia akan dibawa kepada tanah ini dan tersebar. Okay, so once again, this is looking at the Marcantia species. You can see these are the gametophytes, and this is the sporophyte growing from the archegonium. Ang kuning ito saja. Okay, so this is Bryophytes phylum Hepatophyta. We don't focus so much on Anthoceros species and Anthocerophyta in this syllabus, and because we trimmed down a lot of stuff from the old syllabus, so you don't need to memorize that much stuff. What I do want to tell you now is about the terrestrial adaptations of bryophytes, which is they always need wet place. What makes them able to survive out of water? Let's have a look. The terrestrial adaptations for bryophytes, there are 4 of them, and we're going to look at each one. The first of the terrestrial adaptations is that they produce multicellular and dependent embryo. The embryo, which forms after sexual fertilization, diploid zygote will develop into diploid embryo by mitosis within the archegonium. So, selepas persenyawaan, sexual reproduction, dalam archegonium, dia sudah jadi diploid kan? Dia akan develop jadi embryo. And then the gametophyte will carry out photosynthesis and provide the developing embryo with nutrients and water. Okay, tempat di mana dia masih terlindung di dalam archegonium tu, archegonium dan the whole gametophyte yang akan bekalkan dia dengan nutrisi. So the embryo doesn't have to do that much work. The second adaptation is water conservation by waterproof cuticle. So in some bryophytes, the epidermis of leaves and other aerial parts of the plant is coated with cuticle to prevent excessive loss of water by evaporation. Thus, it prevents the bryophytes from being desiccated or drying out. Okay, so this is pretty much the same thing I talk about the terrestrial adaptations for Kingdom Plantae. So, dia memang ada waxy cuticle salutan, lapisan, macam lilin untuk mengelakkan dia daripada kering. And number 3, it produces walled spores that are produced in sporangium. The spores are haploid cells. The walls of the haploid spores will contain sporopollenin that makes the walls of the spores tough and resistant to harsh environments, and it enables the wind-carried spores to disperse through air without being desiccated, and the outer tissues of the sporangium will protect spores until they are released into the air. Dalam arti kata lain, apa point ini, apa maksud dia adalah spore dia tahan lasak. Dia ada sel wall yang keras, membolehkan dia boleh diterbangkan, dan tidak senang kering. That's pretty much it. And last but not least, the fourth terrestrial adaptation for bryophytes is the presence of a multicellular gametangium. The gametes are produced within gametangia. Gametangia means yang macam tadi Enteridia archegonium. The gametangia has a layer of sterile or non-reproductive cells that surrounds and protects the gametes. The diploid gamete will develop into embryo within the female archegonium, thus the embryo is protected during its development. Okay, disebabkan ada sel-sel, ada organ yang melindungi dia, which is the gametangium, gamete-gamete dan zygote dilindungi. Itu membolehkan dia hidup di daratan dan tidak kering. Okay, so that is all the terrestrial adaptations for bryophytes. So just as a very quick summary, please remember these points. Remember the unique characteristics of group bryophytes. Remember the 3 phyla that we look at in group bryophytes, and also the terrestrial adaptations of these. Bryophyta, Hepatophyta, Anthocerophyta. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Pretty short lesson. What you should do now is just come up with your own notes for this subtopic before moving on to the next video lesson. And I'll see you in the next one. Thank you very much for your time and your attention, and happy learning. Bye!